I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This is the PC Engine Files, and today we're looking at Hatris from Alexei Pajitnov. This was also covered on an edition of Retro Hunting Adventures where I looked at all of the different games to be called Tetris or have the tris suffix that were released for Game Boy. Upon closer inspection, though, I realized that it also came out for the PC Engine in Japan. Now, like a lot of things on Wikipedia, they actually list it as being for TurboGrafx 16, but then when you go to the list of all the different games that were released for PC Engine and TurboGrafx 16, it has a very big category that says unreleased for North American games compared to their PC Engine counterparts. For example, Hatris, published by Micro Cabin. North America, unreleased. Japan, May 24th, 1991. So let's get it straight. This did not come out on TurboGrafx, and there probably wasn't much reason to for, well, aside from the obvious reason that the TurboGrafx 16 was fourth in a 3-horse race, which is what makes it so collectible and desirable now. It's just not a game that gained a lot of traction compared to Tetris. So while it may have been worth it to put it on the PC Engine because it was a pretty successful brand in Japan, it didn't achieve that kind of traction that there was any reason to localize it and print a hue card. And even though it would have been very easy to do so because you don't need to translate Japanese to English, they just didn't bother. So if you don't know the game Hatris from my Game Boy video or just in general, it's pretty simple. You drop hats, they come in pairs, you make a stack of 5 and they disappear. Or if you get that flame power up, you can clear a whole column of hats, which is pretty useful because if you stack the wrong kind of hat on top of one by accident, which is pretty easy to do in this version because when you're hitting the down button to drop a hat, sometimes you can drop 2 in a row without meaning to. You can use the fire to clear all the hats down to the hat that you do want to match, and therefore open up more possibilities for you. And every so often, after you complete a level by clearing the requisite number of hats, there will be a, quote, hat sale at the hat shop where you can buy a hat and eliminate all of that matching hat on the screen. So if you're overflowing with too many of one hat, you can get rid of them all in one fell swoop. And that's Hatris for you. It's a puzzle game from Alexei Pajitnov, the creator of Tetris, that involves hats. It's interesting is the nicest way I can put it. It's certainly not my favorite puzzle game, but I don't hate it. And I am amused that there is a PC Engine TurboGrafx version of it, since I had previously only associated it with Nintendo and Game Boy. So if you want to pick it up, it's not terribly expensive. Loose, it goes for $8, complete 15. So either the print run was high or the demand is low. So if you're looking for a cheap PC Engine game to add to your collection, this would be a very, very good place to start. And again, if you like puzzle games, it's not going to light your world on fire, but it's not going to insult you either. It's just a very, very odd concept, matching stacks of hats. And the longer you play, the more varieties of hats there are, so therein lies the challenge, keeping up with the variety of hats when there's more hats that you have to match, and you get random pairs of hats, and you don't know what's coming next. As always, thanks for watching. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. Welcome to the PC Engine Files, and this week we're taking a look at Parasol Stars, The Story of Bubble Bobble, Part 3. It seems to me like everybody has played Bubble Bobble Part 1. It is one of the most common games you will find for NES. If you buy an NES from somebody at a garage sale, chances are you'll get a Mario Brothers Duck Hunt, and a Bubble Bobble cartridge. If you buy a lot off eBay, chances are a Bubble Bobble cartridge will be in it. It seems like everybody had a copy of this game. It is in plentiful supply, but once you get further along to later iterations like Rainbow Islands and Parasol Stars, the games become increasingly harder to find and more obscure than their origin. Now, this one has changed Bub and Bob from the original game into humans named Bubby and Bobby. They were also humans in Rainbow Islands. That's not important. This time, in Parasol Stars, as the name of the game would suggest, you're using an umbrella as a weapon. Instead of bubbling the monsters and then knocking them to score your points and collect the bonuses, you're using the parasol to fling things around. You can fling raindrops into the enemies, you can fling enemies into each other, but whatever you hit, you have to hit it with the parasol before you can fling it away. If you just bump into it without using the parasol, you lose a life. And you can lose lives rather quickly in Parasol Stars. Things start to mount up fast. If you're not keeping track of the enemy placement, you can get yourself in big trouble in a hurry. Now, not having played this game for a while, I made the mistake of realizing that I had to kill this piano in the middle of the screen. I just want to stop and examine the absurdity of that sentence for a minute. I didn't realize I had to kill this piano in the middle of the screen. Only in a video game can you say a sentence like that and not be completely insane and get put in a straitjacket and taken away to the funny farm. But yes, I had to kill this piano in the middle of the screen to clear the level. So I lost all my lives and had to start over again. And then I started thinking, okay, let's attack the piano. And then boom, piano destroyed. But of course the level is not over until I clear all of the monsters, which are all bouncing musical instruments on this particular screen. The nice thing about Bubble Bobble series games is you don't have a set order you have to clear the enemies in. You can take out the big ones, the little ones, go left to right, go top to bottom, any order you want, it's okay. In fact, the screen itself is no limitation. You can actually go through the bottom and warp back around to the top. So if you decide you want to clear some enemies on the bottom and then warp around to the top and then work your way back down again, you can do that. Or you can jump up through the platforms. You can go from the bottom to the top, left to right, whatever you want. The fun of the Bubble Bobble games is the creativity by which you can solve each level. It's a little bit of a platformer, it's a little bit of a puzzle game, it's a lot both combined together into one unique setup. Previous games in the series started out in the arcades and were later ported to home consoles, but Parasol Stars is unique for the Bubble Bobble series in that it started out as a PC Engine game and then got ported to other consoles. It did come to TurboGrafx 16 just barely in North America in 1991, but good luck finding it, and if you do, I'm afraid to tell you it's not going to be cheap. You probably want to buy one of the compilations that includes multiple Bubble Bobble games and play it that way instead, because if you're buying Parasol Stars alone by itself, whoo, look out. You are in for it. Loose? Well, loose it goes for $85, complete 104, brand new, in the box, never opened, $290. Can I justify spending $85 on one TurboGrafx game? Not anytime soon. I wonder if the PC Engine version is more affordable. Let me just go take a quick look at eBay while you watch my gameplay footage, and we'll find out if you can have it for slightly cheaper by buying the Japanese import instead. Parasol Stars, PC Engine. That should bring up a few results. What do we have? Okay, Loose $59, complete $185. Let's sort by price, lowest to highest with shipping. Okay, $59 is the lowest you can get the Japanese version for, so it's not cheap no matter what you do. Thankfully, emulation is a good way to try it before you make that investment, and there are versions for other systems. Game Boy and NES versions came out in 1991. Commodore Amiga, Atari ST versions came out in 1992. There were planned versions for ZX Spectrum and Commodore 64, but they never came out. There are some rumors about this game that are pretty wild. Ocean Software said that the developer's computer was stolen in a burglary while they were working on the Commodore 64 version, but later revealed the game was scrapped because the freelancer who was developing the game for Commodore 64, his wife destroyed his computer in a drunken rage along with backups of the game. I don't even know how true that is. I mean, that's cited as a fact with an annotation on Wikipedia, but man, that is just an insane story. It did come out as Bubble Bobble featuring Rainbow Islands for Sega Saturn and Sony PlayStation later on, so there are other ways to get the game besides playing it on PC Engine, but this is the PC Engine files, so that's what we're doing today. The PlayStation version is actually pretty reasonable. $10 loose, $20 complete. The Sega Saturn version, not cheap, but it's in the ballpark. $28 loose, $40 complete. So if you just don't want to pay PC Engine prices, you can still play this game at a much lower cost. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. Thanks for watching. From the opening title of this screen, you might think this is an exciting, fabulous trip to Las Vegas, complete with a fireworks show on the Strip, but no. It's just AV Poker from Games Express. I'm your host, Mr. MegaManFan. This is the PC Engine Files, and we are back with one of the most infamous game developers of the PC Engine platform. Games Express is known for low quality, unlicensed, and very softcore cheesecake PC Engine games. I'm using softcore and cheesecake because I don't want to get flagged for adult content, which is also why I'm not playing the special version of AV Poker. But it would probably be more exciting because this is just video poker. Have you ever played video poker? Then you've played this game. You get dealt a hand of cards. You pick a couple of cards to keep. You get dealt new cards. If you have a good hand, you win. If you have a bad hand, you lose. Whatever amount you bet is multiplied by the odds of the likelihood of getting that hand. That's how video poker works. You can go to any riverboat casino, any gambling establishment, any keno spot, and play video poker. In fact, if you're on the Strip in Las Vegas, you can pretty much walk in the door of any establishment there, and there's a video poker machine. Just put some money in, and you're good to go. If you want to relive that experience in the most boring, tedious way possible, AV Poker is for you. It says good luck every time you make a bet and get dealt the cards. And that's appropriate because good luck having any fun with this. Yeah. Sometimes the games just speak for themselves, don't they? AV Poker doesn't have much to say, and I don't have much to say about poker because I assume you all know how to play poker, and if you don't, the screen right here tells you what to do. You want to get 2 pair, 3 of a kind, a straight flush, a full house, 4 of a kind, a royal flush. It's all combinations of cards that are randomly dealt to you from a deck of 52. So get all of a suit or all of a straight combo, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, jack, whatever. You make those combinations and you win money. And amazingly enough, by random luck, I just won there. I got a full house, 3 of one card and 2 of the other cards. So that's one of the best hands you can get, and probably statistically speaking, one of the likeliest hands you'll get of the rare hands in poker. So there's not much more I can offer you about AV poker that isn't self-evident. You've played poker, you know how this works. And I just won 2 hands in a row, so it's not going to get much better than that. Let's instead switch to some footage of my cat Tango sitting on the controller and preventing me from playing any further. Not that I really wanted to. So that's AB Poker. I'd say it's got a decent background music for Games Express standards, not up to normal PC Engine developer standards, but by their own low ability to create games, it's okay. It would get annoying after any amount of time, but on short listens, you can put up with it. And as far as poker goes, it's video poker. Would I buy this? No. Would I play this on my SSD 3? No. Does it exist? Yes. And that's the truth about most Games Express releases for PC Engine. They exist. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. Thanks for watching, and hopefully next time we'll have something much better to show you than this. It seems like Atlas released games only increase in price over time, and this one is no exception to the rule. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and today on the PC Engine Files, we're looking at Mesopotamia. But if you live in North America, you might know this game as Summer Assault, which is a pun on somersault, because apparently the protagonist of this game can actually leap over certain enemies, though God knows how, because I certainly haven't been able to do it. It is a very wacky game. Before I get into the gameplay, let me just start out by saying this opening music is incredible. There doesn't need to be anything going on. You could just sit here and listen to this. This is like a classic 1980s Commodore 64 chiptune with the SID chip. That's the quality of the opening music. And I guess that's a credit to Atlas in general, is they very rarely half-ass anything. So even for a static screen with nothing but music playing, Mesopotamia already has value. And as for value, holy shit, man. You're going to be paying $85 for a loose Hue card if you get the Summer Assault version. You're going triple digits for a loose version from Japan, and complete, it could go for anywhere from a few $100 in the US to $600 in Japan. So you are paying through the nose if you want to own a physical copy of this, which makes it highly unlikely that I will ever own one myself, unless it just happens to literally fall into my lap. Like if a comet from the sky brought me a copy of Summer Assault and said, "This is yours now," I'd start to blow it off first because it'd probably be hot from coming through the atmosphere. Whoa, whoa, hot! And then I'd be like, okay, I'll keep it if it isn't already singed to a crisp. This game is strange in a good way. It's kind of a platformer. It's kind of a shoot 'em up. It's kind of all over the place. You're a slinky. That's the best way I can describe the protagonist of this game. And the slinky can shoot at things horizontally or vertically, depending on which way you're traveling. Do you remember the part of Wonder Boy 3, The Dragon's Trap? Well, if you've played it, you will, and if you don't, this might be a completely obscure reference, so I apologize. But do you remember the part of Wonder Boy 3, The Dragon's Trap, where you're a mouse? and the mouse can cling to walls. And so you travel through a castle to one of the dragons that you have to defeat by running through a maze with very narrow passages, clinging to the walls, going upside down at times, battling enemies with your sword. Yeah, that's what this feels like. Summer Assault / Mesopotamia is a cling to walls game where you're shooting at things instead of fighting them with a sword. And I guess you can't really call it a shoot 'em up in that respect, because in a shoot 'em up you would be traveling in a direction, horizontally, vertically, diagonally, sometimes changing from any one of those three at any given time to another. But in this, you're moving around a screen, all over the screen, but you still have to shoot at things like this boss character. And there's also a time limit for these levels, and you can see it steadily ticking down up in the upper right corner. Although if you die during the boss fight, you get more time back. At least that's what I discovered. But when you get to like 60 seconds left on a level, the timer pops into the middle of the screen, and it's kind of like, hey, hurry up, you better keep going. So you have these bosses at the end of each level, and you have objectives that are changed based on the zodiacs of the calendar. Like that opening screen right after I hit start, it was actually having me enter a birth date. I didn't even know that at the time, so I chose January 1st or something. But if your zodiac sign for your birthday matches the zodiac of the level that you're playing, then you actually get bonuses based on that. Like enemies will give you power-ups instead of shooting at you. How crazy is that? And why do these horse heads look like chess pieces? And now this kind of reminds me of Super Mario Bros. 3, where when you step on certain platforms, they extend outward and you can travel on them. Thankfully, they don't retract while you're standing on them, but that's an interesting gimmick. I wish I could somersault, because some of those enemies I was shooting, they had power-ups that just floated on by, and I was like, man, I want those power-ups. I even tried going backward and going back down the wall to get them, but no, you can't do that. So if there is a way to somersault in Summer Assault, please let me know which button it is I have to press, because I couldn't figure out if it was 1 or 2 or run or anything. It just didn't seem to happen for me. Well, I wish this wasn't a $80 to $600 game, because as wacky as this is, it's my kind of wacky. I really enjoyed my time playing it for this episode of the PC Engine Files. Got to use a definitive strategy for each one of these bosses. Like on this one, you've got to avoid the falling rocks, you've got to avoid the laser fire, you've got to avoid it when it charges at you, and between all of those things, you still have to fire off enough shots to do damage. So, see, there's the timer telling me I've only got 60 seconds left, but if I can't beat the boss, I don't think how much time I have left is really going to make any kind of a difference. But as video game mascots go, a Slinky that shoots at things has to be one of the strangest. In fact, I believe, if I remember what I was reading correctly in my research, GameSpy ranked the character of Summer Assault number 9 out of their 10 worst video game leads of all time. I wouldn't say a Slinky that shoots things is a great idea for a lead character, but then again, when has anything necessarily been an ideal video game candidate for a lead character? Was taking a circle that looked like a shape of a piece of pizza missing, was that supposed to be a great idea for a video game character? And yet Pac-Man became one of the biggest franchises of all time. So was a plumber wearing overalls who goes around attacking crabs and turtles supposed to be a great character? And yet Mario is one of the greatest franchises of all time. Obviously, Mesopotamia / Summer Assault didn't achieve that kind of heights, but just being unusual or strange isn't necessarily a detriment to being a great game. And my game is over, but your game doesn't have to be. Just enjoy this awesome outro music for a second. It's worth it just to sit here and listen to the intro or the outro of Mesopotamia. This is truly an amazing game, and you should fire up an emulator or put this on your Super SD System 3 and give it a spin. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This is the PC Engine Files, and as always, thank you for watching. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and today on the PC Engine Files, we're taking a look at Dragon's Curse. This may already be familiar to some of you, and I'm about to explain why, and then once I do, we can get into the fun of this game, and it is definitely fun. Now, you wouldn't know it just from looking at the title, but this is actually a sequel to Wonder Boy in Monsterland, which is in itself a sequel to Wonder Boy, and therein more explanation is required. You see, back in 1986, Wonder Boy was a game developed by Escape, now known as the West 1-Bit Entertainment, and published by Sega. And therein, there was a diverging branching of paths because licensing arrangements were, how shall I say, convoluted. They wanted to publish Wonder Boy on the NES and the Famicom, but Sega retained the Wonder Boy trademark and they weren't about to let that be on the NES. So Hudson Soft teamed up with Escape and they're like, okay, we'll just remake this. We'll use the exact same formula from Wonder Boy, but we'll remake all of the characters to look like something different and call it something different. And that started the Adventure Island series. So, common lineage in Wonder Boy, but two completely divergent series of games. In one direction went Adventure Island with Master Higgins, and in the other went Wonder Boy. Now, Adventure Island stuck largely to the same script with minor iterations through 4 different NES games, but basically, you're always running from left to right, trying to keep your health up as it constantly depletes, and occasionally defeat bosses and find hidden areas. Whereas the Wonder Boy series kept the side-scrolling, but went from just being a straight platformer to having more role-playing game elements, where you had to collect coins, buy items, upgrade your armor, your weapons, and fight progressively different bosses with different sets of abilities. And once you have the ultimate set of armor and weapons, you can progress to the final boss of the game. So by now, many of you have ascertained the fact that this is Wonder Boy 3: The Dragon's Trap from Sega Master System, but due to the game's popularity, it also got a port to the TurboGrafx/PC engine called Dragon's Curse. And they did some things that are better, and some things that I'm not such a fan of. For one, I would say that the controls are much sharper in the Sega Master System version, which may seem strange to some of you given that the Sega Master System's D-pad is quite notorious, but I find it's actually easier to play it than on a TurboGrafx D-pad, or in this case, using a Genesis 6-button controller with OpenEMU to record this footage. Either way, I think I just got used to the Sega Master System D-pad because I played it so much as a kid. I had a friend, Sir Crunch, who you may know from his YouTube channel and occasional appearances here on my channel. He loaned me his Sega Master System for an entire summer, so I played the heck out of Wonder Boy 3, and I can hum almost all of those tunes from memory. It's just something about the sound chip in the Sega Master System sounds so much more robust than this version, and probably sounds even better if you played it in Japan, considering they had an FM synthesizer. So I'm just going to right out say from the very beginning that when it comes to the sound, I prefer the Sega Master System over this one. I also think the color palette looks a little strange. Not bad per se, but like your dragon transformation when you get your first curse here, you look a weird stain of yellow that you don't on the Sega Master System. And it seems like they tried to change the plot here and take it away from the Wonder Boy series. Oh no, they got you. You've been cursed by the dragons and now you're a gruesome creature. You have no choice but to search out the powerful antidote of the Salamander Cross. Say, what now? The what now? Your success depends on acquiring the legendary armor and arsenal to assist you in battle against the 5 beastly brutes. You are a desperado in your fight to return your good looks and save the world from the clutches of these dragons. Quite frankly, that's just cheese. It's stinky Limburger cheese. I know that games are fantastical to begin with, but Wonder Boy 3, The Dragon's Trap explanation was so much better than that. Oh boy. But saves are a huge plus to this version, because in the Sega Master System version, you had to write down passwords to save your progress, and it was very long and tedious to enter them. But in Dragon's Curse, you can actually save the data if you have the ability with your PC Engine or TurboGrafx 16 to record saves, and of course emulators automatically have that ability. You can save a backup of your current progress and then continue on from there. So you can only do that when you're in town at a save point. That pig at the beginning who owns a save hotel or something, but you go and visit him, and he also gives you the password just in case you don't have the ability to save. But trust me, save. For example, I'm skipping ahead a few minutes in my footage here to when I got back to town having earned up some gold, and I'm going to buy some equipment with that gold, a mithril shield and a mithril armor, and they will give me much greater defense for playing the game, which means that enemies won't take as much of your heart that shows your health status when you take a hit from them. And of course, as you progress through the game, you can add additional hearts to your life bar, just like The Legend of Zelda. But you go into this menu with your run button, and you select the armor and the shield, and then you're better equipped to go on those fights. But once you've bought those weapons and armors and items to help you save, you spend a lot of time earning up the gold to buy them, and you don't want to just lose them if you happen to die and have to recollect everything all over again, all the gold, all the items. Save. Save. Another little tip I'd like to offer you, which applies to not only the Sega Master System and the TurboGrafx, but the remake by Lizard Cube, is that you can farm coins in certain areas. You see, right now I don't have enough for this goblin male. Much as I might want it, I can't afford it, and he's not going to give me a loan to make up the difference, so the only thing I can do is earn up additional coins. But when you go into these areas, the monsters respawn when you go back out the door, so all you have to do is kill the enemies over and over again, collect the coins each time you kill them, and eventually, if you keep going in and out the door and respawning all the monsters, you can earn enough coins to get whatever item that you want. Now, obviously, if the item costs thousands of coins, as some of the items do later in the game, you're not getting very far at 5 or 10 coins each enemy you kill. That's incredibly tedious. But for some of these lower cost items, farming coins is a very good way to go, especially if you can buy a much more powerful armor that will give you much more defense and get you much further in the game, because you'll be able to absorb more hits without dying. Oh, and incidentally, you do get one blue potion at the beginning of the game, and it can resurrect your life. If you run out of health, it will restore you to, well, when you have one heart, it'll restore you to full health. When you have multiple hearts, it may not restore all of the hearts, but it will restore some or most of them. So you can also, in certain shops, buy more blue potions, and if you die, there's a roulette wheel that will give you a random 1 in 5 chance of getting another blue potion for your next run through the game. So, pro tips from somebody who has spent a lot of time playing Wonder Boy 3 in multiple iterations. My favorite is still the Sega Master System, and I think Lizard Cube feels the same way, because when you switch back and forth between the updated graphics and sound and the classic graphics and sound, they don't refer back to the TurboGrafx 16 version, they refer back to the Sega Master System version. So that's what they based it on, and that's clearly the one that they're the most fond of. So am I, but Dragon's Curse is a fine PC Engine game. I like the Sega Master System version just a little bit better, but I think the save files really do add something, and I think this is one of the most fun platforming / role-playing games that you can play on a PC Engine or a TurboGrafx 16, so don't be shy of it. Even if you have to play it off an EverDrive, I would say go out of your way to do that, especially if you don't own a Sega Master System to begin with. You can, of course, always do things like emulation, as I'm doing here to demonstrate it, but I'm just saying it's a worthwhile use of your time. You will not regret playing this game. The only thing you might regret is paying the prices that the TurboGrafx 16 version goes for, $81.90 loose, $105 complete. You probably get an EverDrive for less than that. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and as always, thank you for watching. My favorite way to watch anime is Japanese language with English subtitles. If Maizen for PC Engine was just such a game, I could probably recommend it. I can certainly recommend the anime. There were 96 episodes produced. I could easily recommend the manga. There are over 25 million copies in circulation. As for the game, well, if you don't read Japanese, you're not going to get any farther than I did, which is absolutely nowhere. That doesn't mean I can't tell you more about it anyway. The main character is a 20-year-old college student named Yusuke Godai, and he is in love with the manager of the boarding house that he's staying at. Her name is Kyoko Otonashi. She's recently widowed. Her husband was a teacher who died tragically right after they got married, and he was about to leave the boarding house and move on with his life when she suddenly arrived at the door and said, "I'm taking over as manager." And he was struck head over heels in love on first sight of her and decided, you know what, I'm going to stay around this boarding house for a little while longer. Now, the rest of the anime is the tragic misadventures of them both having feelings for each other, but never quite being able to figure it out because he's shy and unable to express himself. His roommates at the boarding house are mischievous and of no help, and there's constant misunderstandings, like a girl who takes an interest in him, so Kyoko feels like he has a girlfriend even though he denies it. Only the girl who shows interest in him swears that she is his girlfriend, so it's just one mishap after another. It all works out fairly well in the end. I don't want to spoil too much of it if you've never read the manga or watched the anime, so do be sure to check that out. But as for Maizen on PC Engine, I regret to say that without an English language patch, there's nothing I can do here, and I want to, but all I end up doing is wandering around these hallways, looking at doors over and over again. The interface reminds me somewhat of Deja Vu or Uninvited on the NES, and in English I might give that a chance, but then again I didn't enjoy those NES games very much, and I didn't really enjoy them at all when they were ported to PS4 for the 8-bit anthology, so that may just be a moot point. But do check out the anime. I think it's worth your time. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This is the PC Engine Files, and as always, Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time, hopefully with a game that we can all understand, even without being fluent in the written Japanese language. I'll see you then. Welcome back to the PC Engine Files. I'm your host, Mr. MegaManFan, and today we're looking at Zonk. Although we did look at it before, albeit briefly, when I covered the firmware 1.03 release for Super SD System 3. It was one of the games I showcased when I put the new firmware to its paces, but now we'll take a look at Zonk in its own right, which, depending on who you talk to, is or isn't part of the Bonk's Adventure series. I think it's pretty obvious when you look at Zonk. He's like, what if Bonk, but in the future? For me, I have no problem considering part of the Bonk series, and I believe Wikipedia does as well. But to make a long story short, this is a side-scrolling shoot-'em-up. It is not an action platformer like the Bonk's Adventure games. This one features your protagonist shooting down a wacky, colorful series of enemies that release power-ups strikingly similar to the ones from the Bonk's Adventure games. Again, I have no problem considering this part of the lineage of Bonk's games. When you get the smiley faces and the power-ups that look like meat on a bone, I'm pretty much convinced it's a Bonk game. So you can choose from one of three difficulties: sweet, spicy, or bitter. Obviously, sweet being the least hard, bitter being the most hard. I'll go with sweet since I'm just demonstrating the game here. I'm not trying to challenge myself to play a perfect round or anything. Now, Zonk came along at a time when the TurboGrafx, which never really did that well in the United States to begin with, was severely in decline. It wasn't long after this that the Turbo Duo came out and Turbo Technologies Incorporated took over and tried to give it one last dying gasp of air, and it was not successful, and the whole enterprise ultimately folded out. But the Turbo Duo did have one positive side effect: a sequel to Zonk called Super Zonk that uses the same side-scrolling shoot-'em-up flavor, along with some new power-ups and some new enemies. So if they were going out, at least they were going out with a bang, a shoot-'em-up bang bang in the form of Zonk and Super Zonk respectively. This was also available on the Wii Virtual Console during the lifespan of the Wii, so you could have gotten either Zonk or Super Zonk that way, which would be much cheaper than buying the physical game. I mean, what was it, 800 points for TurboGrafx games? That's like $8 without tax. And then, of course, you pay $100, $200 for a physical copy. Yeah, paying $8 for the Wii Virtual Console version doesn't seem so bad at that point. True, you were paying more for them than NES games on the Virtual Console, but you also knew that they were licensed games and that the original creators of the Zonk series, Bonk series, were getting their due and not getting hosed by bootleg copies. So you could at least feel good about your purchase knowing that you were supporting the original creators of the intellectual property and Hudson Soft by association. You gotta love how over the top this is. I've got a giant missile as my option to shoot alongside me, and the boss looked like a cross between a giant boat and a whale and a shark, and he was just going all kinds of nuts trying to take me out. But on the sweet mode, I was not having any problem defeating him. And I won't really have any problem until I get a little bit further into this, when I get to the next stage where it's like a city landscape, and then it gets pretty wacky because you're fighting street lamps and fire trucks and parking meters and all sorts of things getting in your way as you try to traverse your way through the city. Not on foot, mind you, still side-scrolling, still a shoot-'em-up, but you're actually battling objects in the city and objects that turn themselves into enemies and fight you. So there's a charm and a sense of humor to Zonk that reflects the inspirations they drew from the Bonk series. It is wacky, it is colorful, it is fun, and that's what I like to do every now and then on the PC Engine Files. It's just play something fun and familiar. It doesn't always have to be something super obscure. Speaking of fun, look at this power up where Zonk just went all turbo like Bonk does when he eats a couple of pieces of meat and turns into the red hot fiery Bonk with the volcano head that just barrels his way through everything. Unfortunately, the invincibility doesn't last forever, and I did die a couple of times dodging the bullet fire. It's a little bit of a bullet hell on this boss, but it's still worth it because this is so zany. Zonk, zany, I just now thought of that. Zany plus bonk equals zonk. How did that never occur to me before now? The only real downside I can see to Air Zonk or Super Air Zonk is the price, but if you can afford it, I would go out of your way to play these games because they're great. And if you can't, well, try doing some emulation. Try playing it some other way, like, for example, the Super SD System 3. Load a ROM onto an emulator or load a ROM onto your micro SD card, and then you can get a good sense of what it's all about and decide for yourself whether or not it's something you'd like to purchase. And you know what? There's even another option, a completely legitimate option. You can get the TurboGrafx 16 Mini or the PC Engine Mini. Both versions have Air Zonk loaded in. And at $99.99, or perhaps less by the time you're watching this video, that is a very affordable option compared to the game. For the cost of Air Zonk alone, you'll get dozens upon dozens of games, and not just one, and they're all licensed, legitimate copies. Games like Alien Crush, Bonk's Revenge, Dungeon Explorer, Newtopia 2, Psychosis, R-Type, Soldier Blade, Super Darius, Superstar Soldier, Ys Book 1 and 2. So much good stuff that you can play on the TurboGrafx Mini, and all of it at a significant reduction in cost compared to buying all the games physically. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. As always, thank you for watching the PC Engine Files. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. It always helps us out. Recommend it to a friend. That helps us grow as well. Like and leave a comment. The engagement is great for our metrics. And above all, I will see you for another episode next Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 Central, as well as new content every evening, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 Central. But for now, I'm going to go play some more of Air Zonk because this game is just ridiculously fun. I'll see y'all later on. Welcome back to the PC Engine Files. I'm your host, Mr. MegaManFan, and today we are looking at Pachyo-kun Juban Shobu. It is made by Coconuts Japan. Coconuts Japan is best known for Pachyo-kun Juban Shobu. Okay, angry video game nerd references aside, this isn't Hong Kong 97, although you might have more fun playing that game than this one, because what we have here is a pachinko simulator with role-playing game elements. It's actually part of a long-standing series of Pachyo-kun games, so many that I don't think I can count them all, but a short list from Giant Bomb includes Katika, Pachyo-kun Dream Collection, Pachyo-kun Game Gallery, Pachyo-kun FX, Pachyo-kun Special 3, Pachyo-kun Pachinko Land Adventures. I could go on and on and on here, you get the idea. They've come out on everything: PlayStation, Game Boy, Super Nintendo, TurboGrafx CD. There is a sequel to this that is CD exclusive, and even Famicom got a Pachyo-kun game or two. I've got one of these games for Game Boy, but I've never been able to make much headway in it because it's in Japanese, and also because you just play a pachinko game. And I've got nothing against pachinko. I actually have a pachinko machine that my dad brought back from his time when he was stationed on the USS Kitty Hawk, and they had shore leave in Japan, and he brought a pachinko machine home with him. So that's cool. I think it's a fine Japanese arcade game. It's kind of their equivalent of a slot machine in North America, where it's complicated. Like, you play these balls and you either lose all your balls or you win balls. And when you win balls, you exchange them for a prize ticket, and then you can exchange the prize ticket for a prize. So it's not technically gambling, it's just kind of sort of gambling. It's like what happens when you go to Dave & Buster's and you play a game where you get prize tickets loaded on your card, and then you can use those prize tickets to go to their Dave & Buster's gift shop and select prizes that you want for a certain number of tickets, like hats, keychains, shot glasses, that sort of thing. So you get how pachinko works, right? If you've never played it before, that's the general idea. But at least at Dave & Buster's, when you're playing some of the coin pusher games, you get some sort of chance to improve your odds by aiming where the coin is going to land, and maybe you can push a pile off if you aim it at just the right spot. Or if you're doing one of the games where you use a crane to pick up a prize, you can practice and maybe get a little better chance of grabbing that prize, although the prongs are very loose and they're not going to hold on to anything very well. So you got to aim it right dead center or you're getting nothing. It'll just fall back out again. But at least you have the feeling there is some skill involved at these games when you're playing them. Whereas pachinko, the balls just fall. You just shoot them and they fall. You're not shooting them left, you're not shooting them right, you're not shooting them in any sort of way that affects their trajectory or speed. You just shoot them. I guess there is a PC Engine controller that allows you to turn a knob like you would on a real pachinko machine to release the balls. But even that, I don't see how it would affect the chance of winning or losing to any significant degree. Now, with this table, I had this feeling in my head as I was making this video that I was just going to stand here and play it until I either lost all my balls or won all the balls available in the machine. And as it was ticking down under 100, I was fairly convinced the game would end soon and that would be the end of the video. But then I had the unfortunate circumstance of unlocking some kind of bonus round. I hit the right target. Not that I really had any control over that, but somehow I managed to unlock the bonus round, unlock the special score, and the music changed, and suddenly I started hitting targets and winning more balls than I was losing, and my ball count went up, and I just internally groaned like, oh, here we go. This is never going to end now. I'm going to be standing in front of this machine forever, and that's not fun. I guess if you're a hardcore pachinko fan or you've played some of the other Pachokun games, you can get more out of this. There seems to be some sort of vague plot going on here. The guy that confronted me in the entryway of this pachinko parlor seemed to have some sort of beef with Pachokun. I'm imagining in my head it was something like, you may think you're the pachinko master, but I run this pachinko parlor and you're not beating my machines. And Pachokun's like, oh yeah? We'll just see about that, buddy. I'm going to win them all. I'll beat all these tables and I'll put you out of business. I'm going to bankrupt you. I'm going to have all the balls. Insert any joke you like about balls here, but the point is, there's a plot if you care. And I don't, because I can't get any fun out of this just standing here doing nothing. I can't win, I can't lose, it just goes on and on and on. If you watch the extended uncut footage from this episode later on, you'll see that I eventually discovered how to pull out a magnifying glass and look at parts of the table to see how the pins were set, but again, why that matters, I don't know. You can't choose the pins you're aiming at, you can't bend the pins, you can't tilt the table in any way so that you only hit the pins you want. There's no point to it, and there's no point to this for me, so I'm just going to say Pachokun is not a recommended game. They can't all be winners on the PC Engine files. Every now and then you get a dud, but at least if you do want a copy of this game, it is affordable. I found a copy with free shipping on eBay for $15 when I recorded this, so if you really are into pachinko this much, it's one of the cheaper PC Engine games you can get. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. Thanks for watching, and next week, I hope the game that I pick will be a little more fun. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. Welcome back to the PC Engine Files, and today we have a curiosity for PC Engine, a French-developed game for a Japanese console. The company that developed this game is called Loricel. I'm probably butchering that pronunciation, and I apologize to all of the French people that are watching or listening to me right now, but be that as it may, they were a developer from the 1980s through the 90s for multiple platforms such as ZX Spectrum, Amstrad PC, Atari ST, ZX81. It's funny, they're not really known for console games, which may be why eventually this ended up being licensed to Victor Musical Corporation. And that one confused me quite a bit because I was like, wait a minute, like the record company, like Victrola, like the record label? But I guess so. And then Infogrames got involved. You may know them as the current parent company of whatever is left of Atari. They own the intellectual property rights to what remains of that once historic video game company. But to make a long story short, eventually between Victor Musical Industries and Infogrames, it came out on a variety of home consoles, including the PC Engine, in 1991 for this particular entry. It has been described as Qbert but two-dimensional, and I'd say both yes and no to that. It is in the sense that your character, the Skweek, is changing these tiles from their native color of blue to the more vibrant pink, and like Qbert, you are avoiding enemies as you do so. But unlike Qbert, you can fire at those enemies to knock them out of your way, at least most of them, not all of them. There are pitfalls that you can't go down, which you have to avoid, unlike Qbert, where the pitfalls are the edges of the boards and you don't want to fall off there. So that's different, along with the fact that there are some tiles that have arrows that push you in whatever direction they point. You can fight against them to a certain degree, but often you need to push along just to avoid enemies or to get blocks that are otherwise inaccessible for you to walk over, so sometimes you actually go with the flow of the arrows. There are also certain levels where you can only access a set of tiles by stepping on a transporter platform, taking you from one part of the level to another. Otherwise, there's a wall of blocks in your way and you can't get to the tiles that you need to change from one color to the other. And there are bonuses that you can pick up as well, some that speed you up, some that grant you other temporary powers, like you can run over enemies without shooting them. At least it seemed to me that happened one of the times I picked it up, but maybe that was just my imagination, and those enemies were not enemies that could do me any harm even by walking into them. And some enemies need invincibility because, as you can see, the one that I just shot there, it was not even vulnerable to my shots. Not all of them can be taken out with your fire. So there are plenty of different things that make this unlike Qbert. You can't just call it 2D Qbert and leave it at that. It's got a same basic premise in that you change all the tiles from one color to another. But besides that, it is completely different. And I would say, if you're looking for a puzzle platform game with a large variety of stage layouts and elements and obstacles to overcome, it's actually more sophisticated than Qbert. The simplicity of Qbert is addictive in and of itself, but this Skweek, he has a lot more on his plate than Qbert. And I think if you have been in need of something new for PC Engine, or your TurboGrafx through an EverDrive or SSDS3, this could be what you're looking for. It's a little bit obscure. In fact, when you try to look up Skweek, you often get Super Skweek, which is the better known sequel that came out on many different platforms. I have it on Atari Lynx, but it also came out on Game Gear, Amstrad, Atari ST, PC Engine. It's available quite a few different ways, but If you do some careful looking around, you can find the original, not the sequel, and if you want it, it's reasonable. It's not going to cost you an arm, a foot, and a leg. I've seen loose copies go for 20 bucks, complete copies go for 30 bucks, so depending on whether you're a completist or not, you can get it either way. But I think a loose card would be okay in this respect because the cover artwork isn't really that exciting that you would need to pay $10 more for. It's just the blobbish Skweek being chased by the same enemies that he's chased by in the game. And even the card itself has the same artwork as the box. So really, you're just buying the artwork twice in that case. What's the point? If you absolutely want a copy you're never going to take out and play, you could get it sealed for 50 bucks, but I think that's kind of pointless. Anyway, I think Skweek is a worthwhile investment of your time. Don't just take my word. You can try it in emulation. Try before you buy, as I like to say. Before you spend $20, $30, or $50 on this game, you should know what you're getting and what you're getting into. And I think it's an underrated, underappreciated game that has very little available about it on the internet. Other than like Giant Bomb and the PC Engine Software Bible, you can't find much about the original Skweek out there because Super Skweek appears to have outshadowed it, even though Giant Bomb's own reviews said the sequel is graphically enhanced. That's all they did. They just took the formula and iterated on it a little bit and basically copied the same gameplay. So if you like Super Skweek, you'd like Skweek. And if you like Skweek, you'd like Super Skweek. It just looks slightly more polished. They found a formula and they stuck with it. And I think as far as puzzle games, you can't really go wrong with this one, especially given the high cost of many PC Engine games. This one's definitely in the more affordable range. And maybe you should pick it up now while it still is, because you never know with these kind of things. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and thank you for watching. I appreciate your time, and I hope you'll give Skweek a try. And if not, hey, some more power to you. Do what you want. I'll see you next time for more PC Engine games. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and this is the PC Engine Files. Today we are looking at Guy Flame, or Guy Frame, depending on who you ask. The PC Engine Software Bible has it one way, and Wikipedia has it the other. This is part of the Langrisser series made by Messiah, or more specifically, made by a team within Messiah until they left, called CareerSoft. And once they left, they continued with a series called Growlancer that was published by Atlas Entertainment, while Messiah retained the rights to the Langrisser name and trademark and continued to make games in the series of their own. Confused yet? We've got two different names, two different series, two different publishers, and we haven't even talked about the game itself. So let's do that. This is a tactical, turn-based strategy game where you control units on a playfield, and when the units encounter enemy units, they go into battle. So basically, you're looking at a Nectaris / Military Madness type game, only I have the disadvantage here of not being able to figure out what moves I'm selecting and what directions I need to go because I am just completely baffled by the Japanese text, which according to the Clueless Gaijin shouldn't be a problem. He says you can play it without knowing Japanese, but I found that my favorite part of Guy Flame was actually the epic music that Messiah programmed into it. I could seriously sit there and just listen to that intro sequence and watch the opening video on repeat. It is a powerfully good chiptune, and the background music when you're actually playing is really good too. Although I suppose if you stretched it out to an hour like some YouTube videos do, yeah, well, maybe you'd be less enamored with it after hearing that same loop on repeat for long enough, but I feel like it serves its purpose as good background music while you're playing, and if you actually knew what you were doing while you were playing, you wouldn't mind it at all. The interface is easy enough to use. It's controlled with the D-pad. You just move to the block of 6 that you want to select, and then you pick the number of units you want to put in that block, and then you move to another block and do the same thing. And when you've exhausted all your turns, the enemy AI does the same thing. When your unit and an AI unit come into head-to-head conflict with each other on the same grid, you switch to an overhead view like this one, and then you have movement within the range of your unit on the screen. It seems to be, I don't know, about 6 squares in any direction of the terrain, unless you're on a tile that limits your movement, like rougher territory, grass, or mountain, then maybe the range is a little less. For those who've played Advance Wars, Final Fantasy Tactics, Fire Emblem, this should all be very familiar to you. And if it was in English, I would probably be really into this. But as it turns out, in the entirety of the Langrisser series, the only game that officially got an English translation and released by Messiah was War Song, the very first Langrisser game on Sega Genesis, and then after that, it's been left up to the fans to do translations and patches and make unofficial ports of Langrisser games after that. So if you really want to play these games, you are either playing them in Japanese or playing them in fan-hacked English patches to get through them. So there is a steep learning curve, and you probably would be better off playing something like Advance Wars, Final Fantasy Tactics, or one of the Fire Emblem games that has received an official translation, and there are certainly a lot of them out there. And there are even more Fire Emblem games with unofficial fan translations, some of which are considered to be better than the official translations, but that's an entirely different subject that I think would probably be in a Lost in Translation video on Kotaku, so I won't even delve into that, but I will say, for those who are looking, you can always find English translations that are different from the official ones, sometimes better, sometimes worse. And I wish I could get to the next part of the game here, because according to the Clueless Gaijin, which is a name that I have to admit would probably suit me when it comes to this game, he says that eventually you get to an animated battle where the two opposing forces take swings at each other, but it seems to be completely random, where sometimes you get 2 hits, sometimes you get 1, sometimes you get none, and you don't even get to determine who goes first. The computer decides, and then the turn ends. So maybe a little arbitrary and unfair when it comes to the actual head-to-head combat, but I would have liked to have entered into that sequence even one time through random gameplay, just moving to a spot on the map where I would have had an enemy encounter and it would have switched to that side view instead of this top-down view, but I was never able to force it. Sometimes I seem to get a benefit from landing on certain pieces of terrain. It would tell me 5 or 10 and make a positive noise, like I had earned experience or maybe found some gold in the woods, but I didn't know how to access my stats and find any evidence of that, and it doesn't seem to display that on the screen. It displays like movement points and hit points, but it doesn't tell you how many troops you have or how much money you've earned or how far away the enemy is. It doesn't really offer a lot of guidance, which is why I dispute that notion that you don't need to know Japanese to play this. I would think differently. Now, this game does intrigue me enough to hunt down a patch for it, so like City Hunter, I think there's more to it that I could get into even further, and that's a little surprising for me to say, because these type of games, the turn-based strategy games, they aren't necessarily my thing. I've got to really like them to really get into them, but I feel like Messiah has done something with the Langrisser series here that it's simple enough that if it were in English, I could easily get invested in it and want to continue playing. There's dialogue, there's cutscenes, there's simple controls, there's something that is Fire Emblem-esque enough that I think I would really appreciate it. But thanks to that Japanese language barrier, I've got to say it's not recommended for anybody other than Japanese players. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. Have a great day. I'll see you next week for another edition of the PC Engine Files. Until then, take care.